Joined now by Amie Just, the Saints beat reporter for the Times-Picayune. Thanks for joining us, Amie.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Let's start out with the beginning of the draft. And, the last couple of days walking around, I've had a couple people say they were disappointed in getting Cesar Ruiz. Why get an offensive lineman? What did you think about the Saints drafting an offensive lineman in that first round?
Yeah, so offensive line was not what I had mocked, but I think it's a good pick. I really do. You can never use too much depth. Like there's no such thing as too much depth on the offensive line. And I think it's a good fit, with everything going on. Obviously, it's not a sexy pick. But what also isn't sexy? Seeing Drew Brees get sacked.
Yes.
Right? That's not what Saints fans want. So for people who aren't excited about it, look at it that way. One thing I did see circulating on social media was, why would you put a rookie in front of Drew Brees? Rookies have been in front of Drew Brees off and on his entire time with the Saints, dating all the way back to 2006. And then last year, his center, who played every game, missed only a handful of snaps, and Eric McCoy, who they traded up to get last year, rookie. Ryan Ramczyk, rookie, when they drafted him in the first round. So I don't think the Saints are concerned about that. They used their first-round pick on him for a reason. And as Sean Payton said, they weren't going to draft him there if they didn't think he was going to start. So that's going to be interesting to see. He played a lot of center, a little bit of guard in college. So it'll be interesting to see where he is on the line when or if camp rolls around. But I think he could make a really big impact early.
Well, let's jump to the third round, and we see it every year. Sean Payton likes to wheel and deal. He did it big time on Friday night. What did you think of those two picks and Zack Baun and Adam Trautman and moving up to get those guys and basically giving up the entire Saturday of draft picks?
Yeah, I'm not complaining about not having to do a whole lot of work today. But yeah, no, so Baun was definitely somebody that was on my radar in terms of potential guys that they could have gone after in the first round if they wanted to. If guys like Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray and, Caleb on Chason and, all those guys, Simmons from Clemson. The list goes on with the talented linebackers that were in this class. And Baun was up there with them. I know the Chiefs were high on him. Some people thought he would go to them at number 32 instead of LSU's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And so getting him in the third was a shock to a lot of people. And Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton even said so. They were surprised that he fell that far. Some potential reasons as to why that would be. Some teams were concerned about his health. And then he did have a diluted drug test at the combine, and he was open about that before the draft. So that is another potential reason why he fell all the way down as far as he did. I think that's a really good fit too. The Saints need a linebacker. That was the position that I was picking for the Saints to get in the first round, and for them to get a first-round caliber guy in the third round, that's huge. And then we were all getting ready to chill out yesterday or late last night, almost this morning even, when they decided to trade up again, get rid of all of their picks for today and put some belief into Dayton tight end Adam Trautman. And I think that was a good pick too. As Mickey and Sean said, he was in their top 40. They really didn't expect to see him there late in the third round because he was, the consensus number 2 tight end, coming out of an FCS school, the first Dayton Flyer to be drafted in more than 40 years. Like, that's huge as somebody who used to cover the FCS. Like, there are no words for something as meaningful as that. LSU's I've lost track of how many guys they've had drafted now, but no, I think that's a good fit. There are a lot of tight ends on the Saints roster right now. Some people were like, why not a wide receiver? And, I think Adam can be a guy that, does a lot of work in the block game, but he's going to go out there and catch passes too. That's what he did, all season long last year for Dayton. And there's a vision for him. The Saints, with both Mickey and Sean, said there's a vision for him, and that's why they chose to, forego all of their picks today, give all of them to Minnesota, who had like 13 picks when today started. I think they traded some of them away. But, there's a reason for that. And the Saints are known for wheeling and dealing, and most of the time it pans out.
It does. Well, you mentioned LSU. Let's circle over there. And a few more picks today. Rashad Lawrence, Sadiq Charles, Blake Ferguson, I believe, went. Can you just put in perspective what LSU accomplished in this draft, having 5 first-rounders, a record number of draft picks? I mean, obviously it comes with the territory and winning a national championship, but this is really unprecedented.
Yeah, it's been pretty amazing to see, just to glance over at my TV as I'm, doing right now to see where we're at. But every other guy, it feels like, went to LSU or, played in the SEC or played against LSU. And could you imagine if Jamar Chase and Derek Stingley would have been eligible for this draft?
Right.
Like, they could have had 7 first-round picks.
Yep, absolutely.
Or if, Grant Delpit didn't get hurt, the list goes on as to how many potential guys could have gone in the first round. But as somebody who covered LSU in 2018, it's pretty cool to see, them going from losing that 7 overtime game against Texas A&M and seeing the initial rebound against UCF in the Fiesta Bowl, and to see how far they came last year and just demolishing a lot of teams and making a name for themselves. I think it says something when you have a quarterback go number 1, the running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire went in the first round. Yeah, you have defensive guys going in the first round, more offensive weapons going in the first round, and then the record breaker is a long snapper. It's every piece of that team, every unit from that team has had somebody drafted, and I don't think they're done yet, whether that be guys getting picked up here in the 7th or just a lot of guys getting picked up in as undrafted free agents and potentially making a name for themselves if and when training camp gets here.
I agree. Well, one of those guys is Joe Burrow. What do you expect out of him, even just initially with the Bengals? How instant an impact do you think he can even make with the Bengals?
That remains to be seen. They've had some tough roads up there for the past little bit there. They had the number 1 pick for a reason, right? Yes. They didn't trade up to get that one, but everywhere Joe's been, he's had a tough road to sled, right? He wanted to go to Nebraska. He wasn't good enough. He went to Ohio State. He wasn't good enough to become the starter there. So he took a chance on himself and went to LSU. And as he said, that first season wasn't great. It was salvageable. It was fine. They won a lot of games, but it wasn't first round pick worthy. It surely wasn't number 1, overall pick worthy. It wasn't Heisman worthy. It wasn't anything like that. And so just to see the turnaround that he's made, and a lot of that, he has credited to the stellar offensive line that he had in front of him and the coaches that he was working around and the scheme that he was in. But I think Zack Taylor, who is a Nebraska guy, almost overlapped with his dad, but didn't quite. I think there's a lot of potential for some really special things to go on up there. I'm not going to say that they're going to become winners overnight, because that's almost impossible. Right. But it's something for people to watch, I think. And if he did what he did at LSU, who's to say he can't turn it around up there either?
A lot of people will be rooting for him. Joe Burrow certainly made a lot of fans last year, not just down here in South Louisiana, but across the nation, especially with his Heisman Trophy acceptance speech. All right, let's circle back to the Saints and give us your grade on the abbreviated draft from what we thought it was going to be. How would you grade out the Saints in their 2020 draft?
I think low A, high B. I think with the picks that they had, they did a good job. Just the draft position wasn't the most optimal. Nobody wants to draft late in the first round because, once pick 20 rolls around, the really, really, really high premium guys are already off the board. You get talented guys, in the first several rounds, but it's not quite like getting a guy in the top 20. But as Mickey and Sean have said, the 3 guys that they got were in their top 40. Mm-hmm. And they got one of those with the second to last pick in the 3rd round.
Right.
So they did themselves a favor. And I think, only 3 picks, that's boring. You look at the roster that the Saints already have in place. Mm-hmm. And, okay, so let's say they had all the 4 picks today. How many of them make the team in the fall? That's going to be hard. They return a lot of really talented guys and then brought in guys like Malcolm Jenkins and, Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah, that's going to happen. They had a good free agency, not a free agency where, they'll lose out on comp picks again, which feels like hell is frozen over. But, it is what it is. But they did themselves a favor with this draft paired with free agency, I think. And just having less, third day guys, I think that'll help decisions, when roster cuts come due. That's always a really hard part, and nobody wants to, cut a guy that they drafted. And I think that this helps set them up to have the best possible roster that they can have this fall.
Very good. Well, thank you, Amie. Don't know when we'll actually see each other in person, when we'll actually be covering football, when the next football event will be, but appreciate your time this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's I miss everybody. It's hard, being at home, happy that we have the draft, happy that we have something to do, but being on the Zoom calls with everybody is a little hard because we want to be in the same room, but gotta keep trudging on.
Yep. We would be looking forward to rookie camp next week, but not to be. Well, that's Amie Just, Saints beat reporter for the Times-Picayune. I'm Paul Boron for CST.